Imagine waking up the morning after Election Day and realizing that nobody knows who actually won. Not because the race was close, not because votes were still being counted, but because politicians, newspapers, and even state governments were all claiming different winners. It sounds like something from a political thriller, but it really happened in America. And many historians still call it the most corrupt and controversial election in U.S. history. This is the story of the election of 1876, the election that nearly destroyed American democracy. To understand this story, we need to go back to the years after the American Civil War. The war had ended in 1865, but the country was far from united. The South was devastated. Millions of formerly enslaved African Americans were trying to build new lives, and tensions between North and South were still incredibly high. At the center of it all was a period called Reconstruction. The federal government was trying to rebuild the South and protect the rights of newly freed black citizens. But many white Southern politicians hated these changes. By 1876, Americans were exhausted. The economy was struggling, political scandals had damaged public trust, and people wanted stability. That set the stage for one of the most important elections in American history. The Republican Party nominated Rutherford B. Hayes. He was a former Union general and governor of Ohio. His reputation was clean. He promised honest government and national unity. The Democrats chose Samuel J. Tilden. Tilden was famous for fighting corruption in New York politics. He was seen as a reformer and a strong challenger. As the campaign unfolded, it became clear that the race would be incredibly close. Both candidates traveled, gave speeches, and promised to heal the nation. When Election Day finally arrived in November 1876, Americans rushed to the polls. At first, everything seemed normal. But then the results started coming in, and chaos erupted. Early returns suggested that Tilden had won. In fact, he won the popular vote. He also appeared to have enough electoral votes to become president. His supporters celebrated. Newspapers began printing victory headlines. The Democrats believed the race was over. But Republicans weren't ready to concede. A handful of states had disputed results. Florida, Louisiana, South Carolina, and even one elector from Oregon. Together, these states held enough electoral votes to decide the presidency. Suddenly, both parties were accusing each other of fraud. Each side claimed the other had intimidated voters, stuffed ballot boxes, and manipulated election officials. The country was entering dangerous territory. No one knew who the next president would be. The situation became even stranger. In several disputed states, rival governments actually sent competing election results to Washington. One set of officials certified Hayes as the winner. Another certified Tilden. Congress received two different versions of the same election. Think about that for a moment. The federal government had no clear way to determine which results were legitimate. There was no rule book for a crisis like this. For months, America had no answer. People feared violence. Some newspapers openly discussed the possibility of another civil war. Armed groups began preparing for conflict. The country was hanging by a thread. Eventually, Congress created a special electoral commission. 15 members would decide the disputed electoral votes. The commission included senators, representatives, and Supreme Court justices. In theory, it was supposed to be neutral. In practice, it became deeply political. Vote after vote, the commission ruled in favor of Hayes. Every disputed electoral vote went to the Republican candidate. The final count? Hayes received 185 electoral votes. Tilden received 184. Just one vote separated them. But the story didn't end there. Behind closed doors, political leaders were negotiating a secret agreement. an agreement that would change the future of America. Historians call it the Compromise of 1877. According to the deal, Democrats would accept Hayes as president. In return, Republicans would remove federal troops from the South. Those troops had been protecting Reconstruction governments and helping enforce civil rights for African Americans. Once the troops left, Reconstruction effectively ended. Southern states quickly regained control over local politics. Over the following years, many protections for black citizens disappeared. Discriminatory laws spread across the South. The consequences would last for generations. For many historians, this is why the election remains so controversial. The presidency may have been decided not by voters, but by political bargaining behind closed doors. So, was the election stolen? The answer depends on who you ask. Democrats argued that Tilden had legitimately won and was robbed of the presidency. Republicans claimed that voter intimidation and fraud in southern states justified the commission's decisions. Even today, historians continue debating what really happened. What most agree on is this: the election exposed major weaknesses in America's electoral system. It showed how fragile democracy can become when political rivals stop trusting each other. And it proved that election disputes can reshape history far beyond a single vote. Rutherford B. Hayes would eventually take office. But many Americans never accepted him as the rightful winner. Some even nicknamed him his fraudulency. The election of 1876 wasn't just a political contest. It was a battle over power, race, and the future of the United States. And nearly 150 years later, it remains one of the most controversial elections ever held. A reminder that sometimes the biggest mysteries in history aren't hidden treasures or lost civilizations. They're the moments when entire nations struggle to decide who really won. If you enjoyed this story and want more forgotten mysteries and shocking moments from American history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us on the Lost Timeline NSC, because history is never as simple as it seems.